Hello there again, second grade. So today for our Fables reading activity, we are going to continue with another fable. This one's called Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Now, I'm sure you've probably heard this story before, but I want you to pay close attention to the details of the story and the parts that we learned about last week, the parts of a fable. Okay? So here we go. Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Once upon a time, there was a very big bear, a middle-sized bear, and a tiny little bear. They lived in a beautiful cottage in the middle of the forest. One morning, just before breakfast, the very big bear said in a very big voice, "Let's go for a walk in the forest." The middle-sized bear answered in her middle-sized voice, "What a good idea! That will allow our porridge to cool." What is porridge anyway? The tiny little bear piped up in his tiny little voice, "Let's go now, while it's still very early." So off they went into the forest. The very big bear went first, walking with very big steps. The middle bear came next, walking with middle-sized steps. And last came the tiny little bear, walking with tiny little steps. Now, while the three bears were out walking in the woods, a girl named Goldilocks was walking nearby. She smelled the delicious porridge. The door of the cottage was open, so she went in. There she saw a table with 3 bowls of porridge on it. Goldilocks looked around, did not see anyone, so she decided to eat the porridge. First, she lifted the very big spoon and tasted the very big bear's porridge, but it was too hot. Then, with a middle-sized spoon, she tasted the middle-sized bear's porridge, but it was too cold. Finally, taking a tiny little spoon, she tasted the tiny little bear's porridge. That was perfect, so she ate it all up. Finally, feeling tired after eating the tasty porridge, Goldilocks decided to sit down. She looked around the room and saw 3 chairs. First, she sat in the very big chair, but it was much too hard. Then Goldilocks tried the middle-sized chair, but it was much too soft. Finally, she tried the tiny little chair. That was perfect, but crack! The chair broke and she fell on her bottom onto the floor. Goldilocks was very cross. She felt very tired, so she went upstairs to look for somewhere to rest. There, she found a bedroom. She looked around the room and saw 3 beds. First, she climbed onto the very big bed, but that was too high. Then she climbed onto the middle-sized bed, but it was too low. Finally, she tried the tiny little bed, and that was perfect. So she lay down and fell asleep. Soon the 3 bears came home, looking forward to eating their porridge. But when they sat down, the very big bear exclaimed in his very big voice, "Someone has tried to eat my porridge!" Then the middle-sized bear, in her middle-sized voice, cried, "Someone has tried to eat my porridge too!" Finally, the tiny little bear cried in his tiny little voice, "Someone has tried to eat my porridge and has finished it all up!" After this, the bears looked around the room. Goldilocks had not put the cushions back in their places on the chairs, and the very big bear said in his very big voice, "Someone has been sitting in my chair." Then the middle-sized bear, in her middle-sized voice, said, "Someone has been sitting in my chair." Finally, the tiny little bear whispered in his tiny little voice, Someone has been sitting in my chair and has broken it all to pieces. The three bears were very angry. Next, they went up to the bedroom where Goldilocks had left the beds in a big mess. The very big bear growled in his very big voice, "Someone has been sleeping in my bed." Then the middle-sized bear, in her middle-sized voice, cried, "Someone has been sleeping in my bed too." Finally, the tiny little bear sobbed in his tiny little voice, "Someone has been sleeping in my bed. And she's still there." At this, Goldilocks woke up with a start. When she saw the three bears, she was very frightened, and she ran straight out of the house and back through the forest. The three bears have never seen her since. And that's the end of our fable story, Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Now what I'd like to do is review with you what a fable is. Last week we learned that fables are stories that teach a lesson or a moral. And they have animals that talk and act like humans. So we can see how the three bears, we know bears don't talk, and we know bears don't wear clothes, and they don't sit on chairs, and they certainly don't eat porridge. But these bears in Goldilocks and the Three Bears definitely did talk and act like humans. Now, the setting. Of course, the setting in a moral in any story is where or when the story took place. And we know that this story takes place in a cottage in the forest. Now, who is the fool? The fool of a fable is a character in the story that gets tricked, that gets outsmarted. And they're usually unkind. So who is the fool in this story? Who is the one that gets tricked or is fooled or is not as kind as maybe they can be? I guess that would be, who is it? It would be Goldilocks. She's the one that breaks the chairs and eats the porridge, sleeps in the bed. And the trickster. Who is the character who tries to outsmart the other character? Well, yes, that would be the Three Bears. The conflict. Something that goes wrong in the story because of a disagreement or a struggle. Well, what are all the things that Goldilocks does in this story? And how is the problem solved? What is the resolution of our story? Well, finally, what happens to Goldilocks? She's frightened away by the Three Bears. Okay, very good, second grade. Let's talk about our moral. What is the lesson that you learn in this fable? The moral can usually be found at the end of the story. So perhaps the moral has something to do with treating others kindly or not taking things that don't belong to you, as Goldilocks did in this story. She should have never been in a house unwelcome. Okay, second grade. Now comes your work for the week. Page 1 is you're going to fill in some of the answers that you have on this worksheet in your packet. So it's simply just filling in the blanks for me, and you can upload that to Seesaw, or of course you can turn this page in with your packet when you drop off and pick up packets at the school. Page 2 will be tomorrow. Answer the questions using good sentences, please. I want the titles, the main characters, and tell me about the rest of the story. For the next day, you're going to read about some information. You have 2 pages for me. You're going to read the information on page 4 about bears. Okay, because last week when we talked about turtles and hares, we compared them with what was in the story with what they're really like. So now we're going to talk about how bears really are in nature. And then you're going to answer the questions of what you read about on page 5 for me. And then finally, page 7, you're going to tell me some what you think about the story. So your favorite part, and draw me a nice picture of what your own opinion of this story is. That will conclude our lesson on fables for this week. We will continue with another type, another genre of stories next time for the next 2 weeks. I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and I miss seeing you all and hope to see you soon. Bye, second grade.